Oh, okay. Sorry. I was not looking at the screen. So you guys, I just wanted to come on a little bit early and talk to you guys before everything got started. So the goal for today, and I hope it does go as planned, but the goal for today is for me to host a panel. And I had to think really hard about the people who I wanted to have on this panel because it was important for me that the subject matter is something that they currently deal with so they could kind of talk to their experience. It was important to me that this be handled in a mature way, and that there be like diverse perspectives. So if all goes well, George Macon will be here, Nylah Says will be here, Cynthia G will be here. There's one other brother I would like to come, and he was hesitant to do that. I don't know that he deals with the dynamic in his life, but I know his viewpoint will be different from all of ours. So hopefully he'll change his mind. But I wanted to come up here first because the nature of this live, which is navigating multiracial family dynamics and what the challenges are in that, what the limitations are in that, and if there is a code that we should try to follow when we're in a multiracial family with regard to protecting our Black spaces, to being revolutionary minded, to progressing our people, and what that looks like for people in that position. And so obviously for me, to progressing our people. Oh, sorry. Obviously for me, this is a very close to home subject. Hi, OG Bootsy. Hi, Rozzy. Hi, Kenny. Hello, happy face. That's crying. Obviously for me, this is a very sensitive subject. So, and it's very close to home. But I feel it's important to have it from an honest perspective. So before everybody else comes on, I just wanted to talk to you guys, just like me and you before they come up, about why exactly I feel it's so important to have this conversation. And, I was already wanting to have this conversation, and I already planned to have it here on this channel. But it was sort of rekindled in me with the whole thing with the girl that has a white grandmother who considers herself to be biracial, even though apparently it's only her grandmother that is white. And that is how it is compromising on the whole for us, how it can be compromising, right, if our minds aren't right, when our families are multiracial, and if that changes our perspective. So before everybody for the panel arrives, I just want to talk about the fact that I view white people in a certain way, okay? I don't dislike them. And to me, and I know everybody doesn't agree with this, there are white people and there are Black people and there are mixed people. And I've talked about this in other videos. I just keep it really simple. I kind of do like, some of these things go together the way you would with a child, and use a common sense approach. And I don't really use the scale that the Europeans created with Mongoloid, Caucasoid, Negroid, Aboriginal. I don't use that blueprint because I hate their blueprint. Hi, Win Love. Hi, Mike Shinnery. Hi, Atlanta Lady. So I want to talk before we have this panel about how I view white people and how our relationships with non-Black people have to go. To me, it is hard to have a relationship with someone who is not Black if they are not comfortable with being honest and knowing when to fall back. I find those to be the greatest things. The thing I notice suffers most in relationships that are multiracial, be that in your family, be that a friendship. I mean, let's be real. We all live in the real world, and in the real world, it's multiracial. So the problem I see the most is that in order to befriend or marry or have these people in your family, it is very, very rare. I'm not saying it does not happen, but it is very rare that you don't have to sort of walk on eggshells for them, right? You don't have to tone down the truth for them. It's very rare. So to me, the first thing, the first vetting is, how real can we be with each other, right? How offended are you going to get at the truth? How much am I going to have to pretend as a Black person that the reality of the situation isn't the reality? And I think this also ties into people who have mixed bloodlines, right? Kay said, do I think all white people are racist? Yes, I do think all white people are racist to a point. Now, I think if you had a white child that was isolated off on an island, you know, with in a multicultural environment where none of us had ever experienced the hand of um, colonization, you know, maybe those white people wouldn't be racist. But in this real world that we live in, I think all white people are racist to a point. And I think, shut up, O'Shea. And I think in reality, what is really problematic is that white people don't often recognize their own racism, right? Because there are degrees to racism. And often the white people who feel they are not racist are sometimes the most racist and the most offensive, and they don't even realize it. And so the first problem that I see is like the general compromise in and of itself. The compromise of, do I have to tone down the message? Do I have to pretend like everything is okay for your sake, right? And I think that is kind of the foundation that I want to lay down before this panel starts. Oh, let me re-email it. I'm sorry. That's kind of the foundation that I want to lay down before the panel starts. Give me 1 second, you guys. Let me resend this link out. Hopefully this one works. All right, I'm resending it. Sorry, Sin. So I hope that I resent the right one. So I'm a little bit nervous, you guys. You know, I don't tend to hold panels at all. Panels are not like really my thing, but it's something that I definitely wanted to address. And I didn't want to address it alone. I wanted to bring other people in. I think a really good example of what happened. Sorry, you guys. Okay, it's fine, Sin. I sent you another one. Hey, Sexy Runa. I think the issue that I have is that there is a compromise there. I think a lot of times when we talk about, is it compromising to be married to a white person or a non-Black person? Is it compromising to have them in your family? Is it compromising when one of your parents is not Black? And I think it is compromising. I just think we have to be honest in that it is compromising. But outside of if there is a compromise, I hate to get sidetracked by the fact that there have been mixed people, there have been people from multiracial families, there have been people married to individuals who were not Black, who have done good for the community. Because I think it's really important, in my opinion, that the exceptions prove the rule, but they do not make the rule. In other words, do we put ourselves in greater danger when we pretend like there's not a compromise that's happening simply because we know occasionally these people do amazing work for the Black community? Do we blanketly call people Black and blanketly ignore familial dynamics on the off chance that those people will not be infiltrators? Like we saw with the little girl who said that she believes that she's biracial at the Afro Future Fest. Hi, Kylo. And so in the Hangout box, oh, okay, I'll do that. Hold on. Let me see. Okay, there you go. So there has to be like some sort of rule that we have, right? So let's talk about my situation personally. I think everybody that's going to be up to date actually has a multiracial family to some degree. You guys know what my dynamic is. My first husband was not Black. My first husband was white. I have mixed children. And so for my situation, even though I don't live in the same state as my ex-husband anymore, and we don't really talk like that. The kids are, they have their own phones and things. They're able to contact him on their own. Our exchange is just, once in a blue moon if we really have to do something with relation to the kids. And we're very modern about it. We might email or something for a trip or finances or something like that.
Irene,
But,
I'm in. I just wanted to let you know.
oh, okay. Hey, Sen. But I don't talk to him about any of the work that my current husband does with the community. I don't discuss with him anything about this channel. Um, I don't discuss with him anything about Black people, period, at this point. And even with that level of distance, I would say for me and people like me, because there's always the risk of one of us divulging too much or our vision being skewed by the fact that we have been or are close with people who are not Black, that there are some conversations, especially when we talk about from a revolutionary perspective, that there cannot be the risk to have us a part of. Not saying that a Black person cannot turn on us too, just saying we do have to cut our losses at some point. Hey, Sin, do you have anything to add?
Um, my thing of it is I think that we need to be very mindful of just how we look at people who are in our family and in our community, especially as it applies to race, because we see that people are having certain allegiances. And what it reminds me of is, you know how you read that CDC report on the adoption of Black kids by white people, where it said that the there was a tide turning where it was non-Black people against Black people.
Yes.
That's what all of this, when we get into, of course, the discussion as we get more into it, that's what this kind of brings to my mind, because ultimately it seems like when we talk about protecting Black spaces in the multiracial families, it seems like people now who are biracial specifically are choosing to put themselves on the side of non-black, which ultimately puts them on the side against us, which has been something that they've always been doing. So I think we need to pay very close attention to how we navigate through this, especially considering a lot of these people are our family members, but mentally they have a mindset that's really not for us, that separates us. And I think that needs to be paid attention to. We need to not. I mean, it's hard, and it'll be hard not to look at it emotionally. But we have to understand that even though multiracial people are in our family, we still need to protect Black spaces from them to a degree.
And I would completely agree with that. And I would say this too, not just for people who are mixed race. And I want to, and y'all, I'm saying this, and I have mixed kids, not just for people who are mixed race, but also just going back to the adoption, I would say even more so with Black people who have been raised by white people. Um, Black people who have close relationships with white people. And if you're in this position, if you are mixed or if you're married outside of, you know, the Black community, or if you were adopted by a white family, or if you have a white grandparent, or mixed nieces, nephews, cousins, this is not like ostracizing you from the community. But if you love your people, even if you trust yourself, there is no guarantee that we can trust everybody that's like you, right? So sometimes we have to fall back for the greater good. And that would be a true demonstration of loving your people and being ready for the cause. So that some spaces you can be involved in, and other spaces you're going to have to fall back. And we just have to have that as the rule to protect ourselves, because we're going to have enough on our hands with the Jesse Lee Petersons of the world, right? With the, you know, like this little girl, you know, with the white grandmother, identifying with whiteness over blackness, even though for all intents and purposes she's as Black as me.
Yeah, she's really
Um,
going out of her way to be in touch with white people, and those are the ones that are the most dangerous.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Hey, Dr. G, what do you think interactions should look like? So I'm a Black person. I have a white parent. Um, what does that look like when I'm trying to protect a Black space? Because I'm obviously going to love my parent. I'm going to want to be around my parent. How do you how do you bridge that gap? Or, you know, let's start with parent, and then let's look at other dynamics, like if it's a cousin or if it's a spouse. Let's do parent and spouse, because I think those are the two most intimate relationships and the ones that can be the most dangerous. Spouses, because you lay down with somebody who's not Black every day, and that can really color how you feel about how some things should be approached. It can make you feel uncomfortable about the use of certain language, even if it's honest language. And the same thing with a parent, since that person is literally a part of you, it can feel abrasive, right? When it gets really thick about conversations between white and Black. So what should the limitations be with those conversations, or what barriers should be up, or what safeguards as a community do we need to put in place, do you think, that can protect us from infiltration from a parent or a spouse of a Black person um, who's married to or has a parent that's non-Black? Oh wait, Sen's on mute. Um, until she comes back, let me say what I think. So for me personally, I feel that if a person is laying down with a non-Black person every night, or if a person has a non-Black parent um, that they've met, There are cases where mixed children have never even met their non-Black family. In those cases, I feel that those people don't have to be excluded from conversations about the community because they're part of the community, but I would look to completely excluding them from strategic conversations about the community. Like, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to um, be creating this organization. These are going to be our key players. This is how we're going to get our funding. Do you think that's too extreme, Sin, or?
I really think it's not extreme enough because I think we're not taking into account the mentality that many people, most of them actually, like it's very difficult. That's the thing. It's very difficult for Black people to maintain an attitude of being for their people while they're in a relationship with someone white. It's very difficult for them to do that. It's very difficult for them to even consider what's best for them as a Black person. They tend to ignore their plight and take on the mentality of their white partner. And I won't say that's every single one of them. Obviously, there's exceptions to every rule, but the majority of them take on the mentality of their white partner and assimilate to them. And so I think that by you saying that, it's not extreme enough because we're not. And I get that people may think that I'm extreme, but I live and see the mentality every single day. Like if you don't have actual biracial people in your family or people who are creating biracial people in your family and building with white people, then you probably won't understand it. But for us who are, we see the various different, the variations of their mentality and how they operate over time. And what most of them ultimately end up doing is mentally becoming an enemy to their people.
Tricky's Corner asked, is there a difference from mixed children having Black mothers and non-Black fathers in terms of how they identify to their Blackness?
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead with that, and then I'll give my opinion.
From my experience, yes. And from what I've seen, yes. What I will say is they're more likely to identify as Black when they have a Black mother. Right now, you can just look at right now what's going on in reality. Most biracial people have a white mother and a Black father, and most biracial people do not align themselves with the Black community. They don't identify as Black. They marry and procreate white. They're being raised by a single white mother. So if you look at what's playing out in reality, reality will tell you there is a difference just by numbers alone. And I know specifically in my own family, I'm looking at the differences in mentality. I have biracial nephews and nieces who have white mothers. In fact, most of them do. And then I have two of them who have Black mothers, and the mentality is very different. The ones who are mothered by my sisters, they more likely identify with their Blackness. The ones who are raised by a white woman, who are the children of my brother, they're like white people with a tan. They'll call you racist if you talk about racism. They don't want to be around Black people. They hold the same stereotypes. So yes, there is a big difference from what I've experienced depending on the mother. And I believe it plays out in reality as well.
So I think I agree with Sin to a point, especially when the child is being raised. Actually, in my cul-de-sac, strangely enough, every child in my cul-de-sac is mixed, except for one child. And that family is African. And every child in my cul-de-sac has a white mother. So it's fascinating situation here. And they are very different children. Actually, there's one white child and one African child. But when the other parent is present, let's say both the father and the mother are present, I think to me the greatest indicator of what that child will be like is why the parent chose to date out. And unfortunately, what I find and what we hear here on YouTube, right, is that people in our community date out because they don't like or don't feel they're viable partners in our own community. So I feel when a person picks a spouse of an opposite race or another race purely because they think it's better than picking a Black spouse, mother or father being Black, that child is not going to be right. Because the one Black parent they have doesn't like their own people. And there's just no way that that parent won't pass down their mentality to the child. I also think it's just dangerous in general because there's going to be, again, this compromised mindset where you're going to feel 9 times out of 10 that you somehow have to, and I heard, what's his name on O'Shea's channel that was always promoting, Donovan. Donovan even was speaking about kind of falling back on his Blackness when he dealt with his girlfriend's family. Imagine doing that on a daily basis, like in your home with a child. And funnily enough, even though the non-Black parent will likely consider your child Black, but the dynamics in the household are not normally those of a Black household. So unless a Black person is going to, and there's a YouTube couple that is much like this. The guy has basically turned his white wife into a Black woman. I don't know. I feel like more often than not, it's not going to go well. Now, I can say in my experience, because I'm the mother and my house is ran by a Black man who's really, really pro-Black, and like his job is with Black people. He has a mentoring agency for Black people. He runs a program for youth for Black people. Like, it's just Blackety Black at my house. I think my children are at an advantage, but see, that's not going to be the norm. So yeah, I think it's often better because the mother plays a nurturing role for the mother to be Black. But I think honestly, if the mother hates her own people and that's why she's dated out, it won't matter.
I agree with you, Irene. But can we have a moment of honesty here for a second? If we're
Yeah.
going to be honest, most of the time, 99.9% of the time, it is a very rarity to the degree that I don't even think it exists. When Black men date white women, it is specifically due to self-hate reasons. And it is they're specifically dating her because she is white, not because of her great qualities as a woman, not because her good mothering skills, not because she's good to build with. They're dating her because she is white. And when you go into any relationship as a man, and your sole purpose of doing that is, number one, is because you want to have biracial kids. I mean, we literally have them sitting around toasting to more light-skinned babies with white women. So let's not, and I know it's not you that's doing it, but we have to be real when we say that these swirling Black men are doing it out of self-hatred. Therefore, their offspring is only going to follow in their footsteps. Like, you're not going to have a self-hating dad and a white supremacist mom, and then the product of that be someone that's throwing up the Black power fist. That's not going to happen. So most of them are operating from a place of self-hatred, and they're doing that more often and more likely than Black women are, because we know the reasons why they date out. It's different. Usually the Black woman is looking for what she believes that the Black man can't provide her in terms of stability, commitment, finances. She's not just going with him because he's white. I've never heard a Black woman say, I'm dating this white man because he's white. Generally, she doesn't even compare him physically or in any other way to a Black man except to what he's providing her in terms of stability, commitment, and resources. So you have two groups of people operating from two different compasses when it comes to picking a mate. The Black women are most likely doing it for economic instability reasons. The black men are usually doing it for self-hatred reasons. He wants to erase himself. He doesn't like his mother or sister or emotional. Like black men are more emotionally driven when they date white women. But at the core top of that, it is simply because she's white.
So Andel was speaking about his next kid, son, I think you said, and that he was raised by his family and goes to a predominantly black school. He also feels that we're making generalizations. So here's the thing. I would
I
agree.
absolutely am making a generalization about black male swirlers, and that's because their mentality is playing out in real time. And so him using himself or one or two black men who date out, who just might happen to not be exhibiting those behaviors and mentality, says nothing for the majority of them. So I absolutely am making a generalization. And unless he can prove to me that this is not the majority of black male swirlers, i.e., give me an example of at least maybe 1,000 of them who are operating differently, then I get to say that, and he should stop being emotional, because right now it just sounds like he's emotionally triggered, and he's probably the same type of person that I'm talking about.
So this is what I'll say. Even if I give you and out that it is a generalization, my thing is, if we love the black community, isn't it better to be safe than sorry? Because what can happen, right? When you are biracial, when you have people who are not black in your family, and you're close to them, right? When you have a parent or a spouse that is not black, what can happen, and what we have seen happen historically, just to be fair, is the weaponization of partially black people who have mindsets that are not geared toward protecting and strengthening black people. And they subvert our movements. So even if we feel like, I am the exception to the rule, right? So even if we feel that as the rule, wouldn't it simply be pragmatic to recognize that what we may be able to guarantee for ourselves, we cannot guarantee universally? We would be the exceptions to the rule. Ergo, the rule needs to be that there are some exclusionary tactics going on, especially in sensitive spaces where these people are not highly active or active at all. And that, I think, honestly, I just feel like that cannot be helped, and not even from a hateful place, because like I said, if you love the community, you'll recognize that you might just have to fall back so that it's not hypocritical when we ask everyone else to fall back who's in a similar position. Hi, Nylah.
Hey, Nyla.
Hey, ladies.
Nylah, what do you think about this?
I'm just coming in, so could you bring me up to speed?
Yeah, we were just talking about if there should be limitations on the sorts of engagement people who have non-Black spouses or non-Black parents, um, specifically, but we could extend this to any family member that's not Black that you're close
Mm-hmm.
to their positionality in Black spaces for protection of us. And also, if the gender of the parent in the case of biracials matters, as to their mindset when it comes to the Black community.
Oh, I do think um, that non-black people should definitely have limited input on stuff within the black community. Absolutely. And I do think that gender does matter when it comes to the rearing of the children. Typically, what I've noticed is that when the mother is black, and it really depends because I'm not sure what the metrics is for it, but it seems as if when women specifically get with these white men for economic reasons, which is normal for women, in my opinion, to kind of cleave to their man and kind of get inundated with his cultural norms or whatever that he's doing or whatever. But just from like looking, let's I'm not trying to bash her or bring her up or anything, but like we look at like the Crystallines of the world or whatever. These women seem to kind of acquiesce to whiteness, especially if they seem to have gotten into a relationship with the white man because of economic situations. Meaning that the black woman does not necessarily feel like she's an equal party within the relationship or of equal importance. Like if she feels like she has something to gain or she's marrying up because she's gotten with the white man, I think that they kind of um, get a little bit more indoctrinated into whiteness. If the woman, I think, is on her own and kind of has her own stuff and um, doesn't necessarily need the financial backing of the white man. A lot of times you will see black women with white men that they kind of run over and rule or whatever. And the black man kind of leans towards, I'm sorry, the white man kind of leans towards whatever they want or whatever. That's what I've seen most of the time. Those women usually are raising children that are more so black, but definitely not as black as someone that would come from a home that had two black parents. And it seems like with black men, when they're with white women, the children are basically white, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Depending on, the relationship with his family and how he's raised or whatever. But specifically, I really think that a lot of them just allow the white women to uh, have control over the culture of the child.
So then what is the placement of those people, the black people who engage in those sort of relationships? Like, how far can they be let into not necessarily conversations, but like actual actions that the community takes? Like, is
Okay.
there a risk there?
So, okay, I'm going to use this as an example, and I hope it's not looked upon the wrong way. Um, I had an offline conversation. I don't remember. You know what, Irene, you were there, I believe, um, with Phil from the Advice Show and his wife.
Oh, I
And
was there. Hmm.
right, and do you remember how she said at the end of the day, I'm raising two black girls? So anything that my husband does for the black community, anything that he's gonna do for the black community is making it better for my black children.
Right.
I think that someone that is in close observance of that and that is witnessing their man, work for the betterment of his group, um, they may have some placement because there is a vested interest in black people getting ahead. If she claimed her daughters are black. She didn't say I had two mixed children. She said two black daughters. So if you feel like your children are black, I do feel like you would want what's best for black children. And so you may have a little bit more of a notion to, you know, look in the best interest of that.
Is wait, are they is that are the kids like literally black though? Aren't they from his first marriage?
No, they have their own children. I
Oh,
believe,
okay.
yeah, they have their own set. The girls, I believe his son is from a previous marriage, but the daughters are hers.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, and I do remember her saying that.
Yep. And it kind of put things into perspective and gave me a little bit of respect for it too.
Yeah, I do remember her saying that.
Hmm.
So I would say to me, Phil is literally like an exception to the rule.
Yeah.
I'm going to invite him over. I didn't even think about Phil. I don't know why. But Phil to me is like an exception to the rule. So then my next question to you guys would be, can the exceptions to the rule dictate our actions? Or do we have to feel that they prove the rule but cannot make the rule? Do you know what I mean?
I think that white women that have mixed race daughters that are black don't raise those girls to appreciate their Black features or their Black parts. And I think that a lot of them kind of like, if you pay attention to how white women treat their Black daughters, they kind of only celebrate what is white in them. And like, you see all of, like, if you're in, I don't know if you were in it, but I'm nosy, so I'm sometimes in the groups where like these kinds of conversations are going on or whatever. And a lot of times you will openly see, I mean, even on some of my videos that I was doing earlier, you will see them say that what makes their children beautiful are their light eyes, or their closer to their hair textures, or their lighter skin and stuff like that. And I've even heard, you know, I've talked to white women who said that they feel like they make better Black children than Black women. And then we've seen where, you know, they don't want to comb the Black girl's hair, or they don't like their hair. I've even been privy to a woman with a mixed race child who was pressing a child hair that was not even 2 years old. So I don't think that they really like their daughters to look like Black women.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I've heard that they prefer to have boys.
Yeah.
Over
even
girls.
in adoption, if you look at who white women adopt when they're single, they will adopt Black boys. They do not adopt Black girls.
Can I?
Yeah, no, I've literally seen entire group threads where you have white women talking about how much they like mixed kids, but only the boys.
Mm-hmm.
So my question would be, for what about for the mixed person, right? So you have a mixed person that really wants to work in helping the community and things like that. We haven't reached this point yet, at least not openly in our community, where we're really engaging in really revolutionary and aggressive action toward our liberation. But let's say we get to that point. Do we need to be concerned about mixed people kind of oversharing with their white parent, or people that are married to non-Black people oversharing with their non-Black spouse? Are
What
those
do you mean when
concerns?
you say oversharing?
Well, let's say if we're having, you know, just sharing what's going on, period, because we never know what will go on in a meeting. So maybe we're talking finances, maybe we're talking strategy, be that political or, you know, social revolutionary, like just going home and saying, you know how you talk to your spouse, you talk to your parent, like, this is what I did, you know, this is what's going on, and we're thinking about doing this, and, you know, maybe next week we're gonna, you know, move some money so that we can, you know, protest in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a risk of infiltration? I guess what I'm saying.
I believe so. I mean, I think that it can definitely be a risk. And I just even discussing that with people that have non-Black spouses, I believe it could sometimes be a risk, because you are not going to be able to choose sides if your mother-in-law and your nieces and nephews are white. You may feel the need to protect them. So I wouldn't even limit it to people with non-Black spouses. I would say, you know, any person that you have that is in proximity to a white person is compromised in a way. If they're having, you know, children with them and they feel like they're your family, you can't necessarily share that with them. They have split loyalty, in my opinion.
So then what do we do with those people, would be my question.
I think that you treat them like the minority group that they want to be. We don't necessarily we don't share everything with people who are on the outside. I think we need to handle them like they're on the outside.
Mixed people should not be biased and only resonate with their white side when Black people are suffering the injustice. The thing is that I feel like a lot of mixed people do relate to their white side, because that's what's considered by society to be the best part of them. But I'm really wondering then, what do we say to mixed people? Because I feel like a lot of times in these conversations, and I'll even be reading the chat, and people are really aggressive, and negative about mixed people. They're really negative about, Black people who come from multiracial families or have spouses that are not Black. And I wonder, when you have people that want to be part of the movement, then what do we really say to them? Right? Because we can't exclude them from everything. So they're going to be involved in some things, right? They are some of the, if they're married to a non-Black, they're still Black. If they're mixed, they're still part Black. How do we relay the message to them so that they don't feel ostracized from the community per se, but can be receptive to the fact that there is a reason you can't move everywhere? And this reason is because you're just in too close proximity to whiteness. And if we make the exception for you, then we have to make the exception for everybody, right?
I think it's interesting because I think Black people don't even have a right to complain about mixed people because they're the one creating them. It's not like two white people can go out and create a biracial person. Black people are creating the problems that they're complaining about. So if you're going to support interracial relationships and call people racist and say love is love when it applies to them, then you need to have the same energy when it comes to the offspring, regardless to whether or not they're betraying you or committing treason because you're the ones that are creating them. Like, we do realize that a Black person has to be with a white person in order for a biracial person to be created. So why are they complaining about what they're creating?
I don't believe that the complaints are necessarily genuine or real. People on YouTube um, act as if we all don't have mixed people in our family. They act as if we all don't have someone that we work with or a neighbor that's biracial, mixed, or whatever. It is in everybody's family in some sort of fashion. But we don't see people going around disrespecting people's families, threatening to fight them, calling them bed wenches, and all. That doesn't happen in the real world. That's just YouTube. So I think that people are really actually dishonest about how they really feel about it. For me, I think that I probably took it the furthest within when it came in my family than most people would take it, as opposed to rejecting it. Most people would not go the lengths that I went to reject it and stand my ground. I know that. So I know that the stuff that they do on YouTube is just for show. Nobody is doing what they do on YouTube. Nobody would call anyone a bedwench in their face. Nobody is knocking on anybody's doors demanding them to leave their neighborhoods because they have a mixed wife and all that kind of stuff. That's just a whole bunch of YouTube crap, and I'm not buying it.
I think it's not real because they keep creating them.
Yeah, I don't think they're that mad about it either, though.
Yeah, I do think a lot of things are sensationalized for YouTube. And I think that's problematic because it kind of skirts around the real conversation. And I know that it does make a lot of people in that position feel uncomfortable. And then we're all faking the funk in the chat or on the panel as if none of these people exist in our families.
Right.
And we don't love our own family members or things like that. But I think for sure, I know for me, having mixed kids, if I were moving forward, right, in my life, because I love my children, so I can't really move back. Moving forward, I would kind of roll with what Sin is saying, is that in that I don't think we are in a position to date out.
I agree with that.
Even if nothing is wrong with it. And yeah, like I don't think we're in a position to do it. So I think we could move forward. I know everybody's not going to do this, but I think we really have to move forward with that mindset, especially when the interracial dating narrative is Black men are so awful, Black women are so awful. Like that's the worst possible reason for us to date out. And it also means that we can't trust the people that are doing it, which is crazy because we sort of need a level of collective effort to accomplish anything as a community. But if the chances are that there's something you hate about your own Blackness that causes you to pick a partner outside of our race, then we really can't trust you. And also there's a sickness, like we saw with the little girl, with the white grandmother. There's a sickness when you are almost completely Black but you really cling hard to the small piece of you that's not Black, and that becomes like the thing that identifies you. And I think with that kind of like mental, confusion going on, I don't know that. I think it's a rare occasion that we can really trust to include these people at the most sensitive levels of any movement that we have. I mean, think about it. A whole festival was thrown out of whack because of one girl with the white grandmother.
Yeah.
Just one girl with the white grandmother. Where Fox News apparently has their eye on this.
Yeah, it's really strange.
Well, it's a way for them to scream reverse racism. So, of course, and it's coming from a Black person. They don't take her seriously either.
You don't think they take her seriously either, but they'll just weaponize it?
Right. I don't think they take her. She has a white. She's clearly not biracial. She has a white grandmother.
So the other part of this was supposed to be like speaking about what the code looks like for dealing with these people. So we're not in any sort of position right now as a people where we've organized to the point where we're having conversations that are heavily sensitive in mass. Like there might be small pockets of people that do that, but this is not something that we're doing like universally throughout the country. My question is, what then is the code for, because I know I've been told by several people, like, I shouldn't even get to speak on Black issues, like at all. I don't think that that's necessarily realistic because people are still Black, but I do think that there ought to be some level of limitations. Do either of you like have an idea, not that we can implement it, but of what that would look like? Like what would the limit be? At what point do we say, okay, at this point it's going to be really sketch having you involved?
I think when they start to when you have the groups of biracials that like, one of the reasons why I respect you a lot is that you're open and honest about your family dynamic and the racial backgrounds of your kids, and you seem to try and raise them with the Black first mentality, and that you don't cut corners when teaching them about being Black and the importance of uplifting the Blackness in them and celebrating that. But most people aren't doing that. You have people that are having these biracial children that are fetishizing them. You have the children that are put in positions by their other family members to kind of lord over children that are not, that are Black or whatever. And you have, the different kinds of division that goes on. I think that it just really depends on how they were raised. If they were raised by an Irene, I would say they probably would be trustworthy. But if they were raised by someone else, who knows? So it has to be a case by case basis. Because I do know some mixed people that are probably, as they say, more down than the average person. And then you have some that are clinging to their white sides. It really just depends on the environment that they're raised in. Taz has this saying where I think he said, "My white boy ain't your white boy," when talking about like having white friends and stuff like that. When you grow up around people and you know them and you understand their nature or whatever, you may know that particular person and know the boundary, and they know the boundaries, and you understand their nature, but you're not going to give them the same level of you're not going to give an outsider the same level of concessions and respect because you don't know them. You don't know where they came from. You don't know who raised them. So I really think that it's an individual basis, but I don't know what the benchmarks are supposed to be to know when they are trustworthy, other than, you raising them and understanding who they are personally.
I guess I'm a little more hardlined with it because, the other night I was saying I might trust me, right? I might trust my kids, but I can't guarantee that for everybody. And so I would be willing to say we all have to fall back just so that there's no risk that on this case by case thing, we let in the wrong type of person. So I guess the case by case to me just seems like really liberal, because I think it just, I think we have enough to deal with, like with actual Black people who think funny. You know what I mean?
Well,
Than
if
to
I
bring
had
in
to make
people
a
that are,
decision, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. What'd you say?
Well, if I had to make a decision based on what you said, which is very legitimate, I would just say no, thank you to them. Then you would have to give that barrier to them. You would have to treat them like as if they were not Black.
Yeah. Sin, what do you think?
I think that we already have enough to go by, just like you said, to where if we had to make a decision, just don't deal with them. We can look at history and get all the information we need.
Yeah.
Historically, biracials have never been for us. And the fact that we even have to have this discussion shows that we haven't learned.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Historically speaking, they're very easy to weaponize against us. I think the realistic thing is that, you know, I know with my children, um, if they ask me, are all white people bad? Because I've actually had my children ask me this. Um, I would say to them, and I have said to them, most white people are bad. Your dad may be a okay person, but your dad is just one person, and most white people are bad people. Um, and the thing is that even having said that, nothing's going to change. Like, I have to just think of this, like, in my own life experience, I recognize that at the end of the day, when something is part of a person, there's always that chance. Do you know what I'm saying? There's always that chance when you love your white father, or when you love your white mother, or when you love that white man or woman that you're laying down in bed in, that you might be down, 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 and then all of a sudden the love for that person really flips a switch in you. And
Especially for overly emotional Black people who tend to base everything off of their feelings.
yeah, I mean, that's really true. And
Because Irene, white people can separate it. They can obviously still procreate and have sex with Black people and oppress them at the same time. Black people can't do that. They get 100% emotional and start talking about love is love, and we all bleed red.
I mean, that's true. That's true. And while I don't begrudge anybody that anybody falls in love with, I don't think that we're there yet, number one. I don't think the few, and because I think, I'm sure it does happen that people just love each other, but I think that that is really not the norm of what's going on. And I honestly just feel like in my heart, there will be a point where it will be a struggle. And it's going to be a struggle that a person who's not compromised in that way is not going to have. Um, and that's why I really wish I wasn't like the only person up here that had children that were mixed or had ever been in a relationship outside of our community, because I feel like a lot of times people aren't honest. Do you know what I mean? We often want to sugarcoat things and paint them really pretty because we want the community to be accepting of our current behavior, our past behavior, right? But I think when we talk about as far as really wanting to see Black people win in this society, really looking at historically how whites have weaponized certain groups of Black people against us, um, mixed people against us, when we are smart and pragmatic about the game plan and not seeing the same pitfalls. It's like, you know, how the Black Panther Party wanted to link up with whites, you know, white workers and stuff like that, or, you know, how we consider mixed people Black for them, right? We consider people from multiracial families Black for them, and then they quickly turn around and let us know they're not Black. But because we refuse to learn from the past, And because people in my position will be quick, which is why I try not to do it, to point out everybody who was in this position, right? Everybody who was mixed, everybody who married out, everybody who did good things, as if that was the norm. I think our people have a problem with being very forgiving and forgetful. And I don't see us moving forward if we aren't intellectually honest and call on people in compromising positions to just say, look, it's not that you can't do great work. It's not even that we don't trust you. But at a certain level, we would hope you would love us enough to fall back, simply because we don't know who the next infiltrator will be. And we have to protect ourselves. It's sort of like if you knew, that a woman's weakness in war was like her menstrual cycle. Do you know what I mean? And you have all these women that really, really want to fight, but you just know that like it's going to be a problem. I don't know, because the enemy has dogs that can, smell it or something, like just don't go to the battlefield. But there's other positions you can play in the battle. We just can't have you like literally on the battlefield. And
right, I think that the when it comes to like that proverbial battlefield, um, this is the issue a lot of times I think that people are having with biracials or people that date and mate outside. Nobody is saying that they should not be a part of the community and that they should not, have some sort of place. But what you can't do is come in and lead the charge. What you can do is get your ass on the front line, though. That's what you can do. You can take orders. But and I know that sounds harsh or whatever, but you cannot direct the traffic in this black life as a biracial or as a person that mates outside. You cannot lead the charge. And I think that is part of the problem. I just was yesterday we were having conversation about the Micah Xavier thing and the Gavin Long thing. And one of the things that I had said, which is probably mean, was that Micah Xavier and Gavin Long were representative of the 2019 version of Nat Turner. And so people like the game changers of the world, the reason why they don't respect those types of men is because of who they are and what they stand for, right? So think about this. If black people had picked up on the energy of Gavin or of Micah, and there was organized lone, sacrificial, whatever you want to call it, guys who were willing to ambush and do that in retaliation for police brutality or whatever, white society was doing to black people. If you got a white mother-in-law or white father-in-law, can you sit down and have the conversation with them about that? No, you can't. You can't do it. They looked at that whole thing with a whole different set of eyes. We're looking, a lot of us will looked at that situation as, wow, that, he stood up, he made that sacrifice, he was triggered and, he went out for what he believed in. But they're looking at it as, our freedom is at risk. This crazed gunman, these are our officers. They look at life and they look at law enforcement and society through a completely different lens. And when you're involved with them in an intimate way, you're gonna take up some of that. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah, and I was saying earlier too, for me, when I think about interactions with white people, this is kind of how I judge, or non-Black people, period. This is kind of how I judge those interactions. If the conversation cannot be brutally honest and they have zero problem, then it's probably not a relationship I can have, right? And that almost never happens. It almost never happens that you can be unapologetic, no sugarcoating, no walking on eggshells for them, the way that we talk to each other, and have them be okay. They're going to feel some kind of way. And what you're going to do, or we have to do as Black people, is dismiss them Or what we're going to end up doing is adjusting for them. It's going to be one or the other. They're going to have to leave or we're going to adjust. And what I see happen more than not is we slightly adjust ourselves so as to not harm that person.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Which is why I find it really dangerous. This is what I will say, because I don't want to keep you guys like too long. I'm glad that you guys came and had this conversation with me. I just want the people in the chat to consider this. I want us to really step away from like dragging mixed people, and things like that. Like I don't want people to feel ashamed that their family is multiracial. A lot of these multiracial dynamics in our family, if you haven't personally given birth or seeded a mixed child, it's not even your fault, right? But I do still want people in that position to just kind of think about this and think about the fact that if you love your Black part, right? If you love the part of you that is Black, then it is okay to recognize that if you really want to see us succeed, that there are some things that you don't even, how, let's say if somebody's going on the run and you really love them, they call you up and they want to tell you their location. A smart person would be like, no, don't tell me where you are. Because there's always the risk somebody could pull that out of me. And you guys have to think of yourselves that way, right? Like some things I don't want to be privy to because I don't ever want to find myself so compromised that I don't have the ability to even do what you may really want to do. You may just slide because of your father or mother, or because of your grandmother, or because of, this non-Black person that you have an affinity for. And that would kind of be my final word on it, is try to look at it from that perspective and not so much that we're trying to ostracize anybody as a group or you're not loved and accepted from us on the whole, but more that if you're really about us, then that's going to sometimes include sacrificing your personal desires and ambitions or your pride for the greater good. And we all are going to have to make that decision at one point or another.
I also want to say something too to that. I agree. We should not be arbitrarily walking around YouTube or in real life dragging biracials. There's a biracial girl that supports my channel that gets harassed in the comment section by grown ass men. She's probably not even 25 years old, and always dragging her because she's biracial, like as if she has something to do with that. I don't agree with that. I reject that. That's bullshit. However, what gets biracial people dragged, what will make me drag a biracial person is when they sit up there and try and basically degrade and downgrade Black people while celebrating their racial ambiguity or using their Blackness as a reason to be allowed to talk shit about Black people. So you should not, as a biracial person, you should not be making any racial jokes about dark skin, about nappy. You should not be going in on Black people for their social or economic. You should not be making any racial jokes specifically targeted towards Black people. I'm not trying to say that they can't criticize, but I think their criticism needs to be limited and done within reason and tactful. Because you do need to understand that you are a person that is of mixed race. And there are some sensitive things. And what we see a lot of times, specifically, a lot of times from these men on YouTube that are of mixed race, they will sit there and drag Black women and talk shit about Black women and about Black people and about the Black experience while having the privilege of being biracial or never even necessarily identifying as Black or talking about how, Black is just a social construct. But then when they want to drag Black people, they can talk about the Black race with impunity. Then you will get drugged.
Oh, sorry, Nylah, I didn't
No,
mean
go
to
ahead, honey. I'm
interrupt
sorry.
you.
I was done.
I was just going to say, I just don't understand the point of praising interracial relationships, but then ostracizing the byproduct of it. Because Nylah, the one thing you can't say to a swirler is that they shouldn't be swirling. Yet some of those same swirlers will be talking about colorism, but creating mixed race people who are going to get the favor from the colorism. So
Right.
it's interesting that the chat room would have so much to say about mixed people who didn't create themselves and who were birthed straddling the fence because of a black person choosing to be in a relationship with a white person. But then if we were to sit up here and have a discussion about why people shouldn't interracial date, it will be a different story, and they'd be advocating for interracial dating, which is the way that you get mixed people. So to me, it's just ridiculous. You can. It's like if we were smart, we would have been looked at history and saw how detrimental mixed race people were. And if we really had a problem with them, we would just stop creating them. But they don't want to do that because the one thing they're not going to give up is sex with white people, acting as if sex with white people is not what creates biracial people, who then they'll turn around and say are traitors and are coons and are sellouts.
Actually,
Right.
that really pisses me off too. I don't understand that dynamic. I don't understand promoting interracial dating and then being pissed off at mixed people. Like you cannot do both. You cannot say date out, it'll be better for you. You know, there are benefits there. Don't limit your choices. And then at the same time, you know, complain about colorism. I do think that is ridiculous. And then I would say this, because Andau, I want to be very clear. Andau was saying greater good that doesn't want you a part of it or even a voice. Nobody is saying that. I don't think that you were listening. But what I will
He's
say is,
just triggered, Irene. That's all.
but what I will say this though. I would encourage those of us who do have mixed children and those of us who are in close proximity to mixed children or adults to encourage them to reproduce within the Black community. And then that we can do some reversal of the damage that has been done. And in that way, that's really them coming back into the fold. So a lot of this, when we talk about like working collectively, has a lot to do with not being selfish, thinking about what benefits us in our personal life, but what is also beneficial to Black people on the whole. And that's something that we all have to think about. But realistically speaking, if you are married outside of the race, if you have, you know, if you are mixed, any of those things, all we can engage in is essentially corrective action, because we are correcting old mentalities that we may have had. We are correcting, you know, conditioning that's been placed into us by white society. We're correcting all of those things. And you do have a place, but everybody's place is not the same. And I think that that's okay, especially if you really love your people and you're really about progressing your people. It shouldn't even make you mad. It should be totally okay with you. And if it's
But
not, then
why?
you might need to check yourself. Huh?
But see, they need to pick a struggle, because if you're going to say idealism, and if it's idealistic to say that black people aren't going to stop procreating with white people, then stop complaining. Stop complaining about biracial people and their mentality. Like it makes no sense. When we engage in these contradictory behaviors and attitudes, it just makes us look really dumb and all over the place. If you don't want to deal with biracial people, stop creating them. Pick a struggle.
Truth. That's true. I cannot argue with that. So definitely I'm with Sin. I think even if you have already produced mixed children, like in my case, I don't think that we should perpetuate the image that other Black people should be doing this or promote interracial dating. I think, you know, we need to just move away from that on the whole. And that's not an attitude. Growing up, you know, I grew up in California in the hate, like around hippies. That is not the attitude that was the vibe in my community at all, right? But I have to think past my personal experience and recognize that as long as our community is positioned the way it is, and as long as there are spaces, especially in the southern states, in the Midwest, places like that, where it's not Hippieville in San Francisco, that the promotion that we need to put forth has to be appropriate for what is healthiest for our whole community. we don't have the luxury of being overly entertained. We don't have the luxury of having sex with whoever we want to have sex with. We don't have the luxury of, you know, playing with guns that, you know, that little water pistols that look like real guns. You know, we don't have the luxury of doing a lot of things. There's a lot of things people are out in this world doing that as Black people, we just don't have the luxury to do. So we have to move collectively as if we are still trying to get to a place. And part of that is going to be, you know, really limiting our dating pool and having that be okay. But more importantly, checking our feelings on why we feel we should be able to engage in certain behaviors or why we feel a certain way and being honest about that. You know what I mean? I think a lot of times we want to be delusional about why we do the things that we do. I think having a level of honesty with ourselves will help us view the situation with clarity and not have so much animosity during these conversations when things are being said that make us uncomfortable. Especially because one of my big goals with this conversation that it be done from like a loving place, but like with no bullshit. And so if you're offended now in this conversation, then that's definitely something about you. That's definitely not because of anything that was put out by any of us. And so you might want to check that. But anyway, y'all, ladies, thank you so much for coming up. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you guys so much in the chat. You guys know I do not do panels. I'm really, really uncomfortable with hosting panels. So thank you for tolerating it because it's rare that I have them on this channel. And with that said, y'all, I'll talk to all of you guys later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.